is a local activist and musician. He's going to be doing a reading of August Spies. That's correct? August Spies.
Yeah!
Thanks, everybody. This is a really nice number of people. Certainly worth it. It's kind of like Stone Soup. Something the most of his life. So we had some participate. Reason. But that's the best reason anyway. Right? It's our thing. And certainly open to everyone else. But I wanted to share this. We're looking over what was already been covered about the Haymarket affair. Well, this is interesting. On the evening of May 4th, 1886, a meeting was called for the Haymarket Square in Chicago to protest the killing of 4 strikers at the McCormick Harvester Works the day before. It was a peaceful meeting and had dwindled from several thousand to a few hundred when a detachment of 180 policemen asked the crowd to disperse. The speaker said that the meeting was almost over, and then a bomb exploded in the midst of the police, wounding 66 policemen, of whom 7 later died. The police fired into the crowd, killing several people, wounding 200. Although there was no evidence for who threw the bomb, 8 Chicago anarchists were arrested, tried, and sentenced to death. 4 of the 8 were executed, among them August Spies, who here addresses the court in his own defense. Just before his execution, Spies said, "There will be a time when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." From Voices of a People's History, edited by Zinn and Arnaud. Address of August Spies, October 7th, 1886. Your Honor, in addressing this court, I speak as the representative of one class to the representative of another. I will begin with the words uttered 500 years ago on a similar occasion by the Venetian Doge Fahari, who, addressing the court, said, "My defense is your accusation. The causes of my alleged crime, your history. I have been indicted on a charge of murder as an accomplice or accessory. Upon this indictment, I have been convicted. There was no evidence produced by the state to show or even indicate that I had any knowledge of the man who threw the bomb, or that I myself had anything to do with the throwing of the missile, unless, of course, you weigh the testimony of the accomplices of the state's attorney and Bonfield, the testimony of Thompson and Gilmer, by the price they were paid for it. If there was no evidence to show that I was legally responsible for the deed, then my conviction and the execution of the sentence is nothing less than willful, malicious, and deliberate murder, as foul a murder as may be found in the annals of religious, political, or any other sort of persecution. There have been many judicial murders committed where the representatives of the state were acting in good faith, believing their victims to be guilty of the charge accused of. In this case, the representatives of the state cannot shield themselves with a similar excuse, for they themselves have fabricated most of the testimony which was used as a pretense to convict us by a jury picked out to convict. Before this court and before the public, which is supposed to be the state, I charge the state's attorney in Bonfield with the heinous conspiracy to commit murder. I will state a little incident which may throw light upon this charge. On the evening on which the Praetorian Guards of the Citizens Association, the Bankers Association, the Association of the Board of Trade Men, and the Railroad Princes attacked a meeting of working men on the Haymarket with murderous intent, on that evening, about 8 o'clock, I met a young man, Legner by name, who was a member of the Aurora Turnverein. He accompanied me and never left me on that evening until I jumped from the wagon a few seconds before the explosion occurred. He knew that I had not seen Schwab that evening. He knew that I had no such conversation with anybody, as Mr. Marshall Field's protege Thompson testified to. He knew that I did not jump from the wagon to strike the match and hand it to the man who threw the bomb. He is not a socialist. Why did we not bring him on the stand? Because the honorable representatives of the state, Grinnell and Bonfield, spirited him away. These honorable gentlemen knew everything about Legner. They knew that his testimony would prove the perjury of Thompson and Gilmer beyond any reasonable doubt. Legner's name was on the list of witnesses for the state. He was not called, however, for obvious reasons. He stated to a number of friends that he had been offered $500 if he would leave the city, and threatened with direful things if he remained here and appeared as a witness for the defense. He replied that he could neither be bought nor bulldozed to serve such a damnable and dastardly plot. When we wanted Legner, he could not be found, Mr. Grinnell said, and Mr. Grinnell is an honorable man, that he had himself been searching for the young man but had not been able to find him. About 3 weeks later, I learned that the very same young man had been kidnapped and taken to Buffalo, New York, by two of the illustrious guardians of law and order, two Chicago detectives. Let Mr. Grinnell, let the Citizens Association, his employer, let them answer for this, and let the public sit in judgment upon the would-be assassins. No, I repeat, the persecution has not established our legal guilt. Prosecution. Notwithstanding the purchased and perjured testimony of some, and notwithstanding the originality of the proceedings of this trial, and as long as this has not been done and you pronounce upon us the sentence of an appointed vigilance committee acting as a jury, I say you, the alleged representatives and high priests of law and order, are the real and only law breakers, and in this case, to the extent of murder. It is well that the people know this. And when I speak of the people, I don't mean the few co-conspirators of Grinnell, the noble politicians who thrive upon the misery of the multitudes. These drones may constitute the state, they may control the state, they may have their Grinnells, their Bonfields, and other hirelings. No, when I speak of the people, I speak of the great mass of human beings, the working people, who unfortunately are not yet conscious of the rascalities that are perpetrated in the name of the people, in their name. The contemplated murder of 8 men, whose only crime is that they have dared to speak the truth, may open the eyes of these suffering millions, may wake them up. Indeed, I have noticed that our conviction has worked miracles in this direction already. The class that clamors for our lives, the good, devout Christians, have attempted in every way, through their newspapers and otherwise, to conceal the true and only issue in this case. By simply designating the defendants as anarchists, and picturing them as a newly discovered tribe or species of cannibals, and by inventing shocking and horrifying stories of dark conspiracies said to be planned by them, these good Christians zealously sought to keep the naked fact from the working people and other righteous parties, namely, that on the evening of May 4th, 200 armed men, under the command of a notorious ruffian, attacked a meeting of peaceable citizens. With what intention? With the intention of murdering them, or as many of them as they could. I referred to the testimony given by 2 of our witnesses. The wage workers of the city began to object to being fleeced too much. They began to say some very true things, but they were highly disagreeable to our patrician class. They put forth, some very modest demands. They thought 8 hours hard toil a day for scarcely 2 hours pay was enough. This lawless rabble had to be silenced. The only way to silence them was to frighten them and murder those whom they looked up to as their leaders. Yes, these foreign dogs had to be taught a lesson so they might never again interfere with the high-handed exploitation of their benevolent and Christian masters. Bonfield, the man who would bring a blush of shame to the managers of the St. Bartholomew Night. Bonfield, the illustrious gentleman with a visage that would have done excellent service to Dore in portraying Dante's fiends of hell. Bonfield was the man best fitted to